So good morning everybody, I'm Marie Jenkins from Advance Your Wellbeing and welcome to our second season of The Secret Diary of Marie Jenkins 47 plus. And today I'm super excited to welcome three incredible guest panelists who are all entrepreneurs in their own right. So we have with us today Matthew Baird from Baird Co Recruitment. Hiya Matt.
Hi there, how are you?
I'm very good. Thank you for joining us. We've
Very,
got
very pleased to
Ernie
have been invited.
Boxall.
Thank you.
We've got Ernie Boxall with us from Ernie Said. Hi, Ernie.
Hi Marie. Hi everyone.
Lovely for you to join us. And Renee-Marie Young. Hiya, Renee. How are you?
Hello, I'm good, thank you. It's really lovely to meet you and be here. So thanks very much.
That's brilliant. And what I like about this is both Matt and Ernie were part of season 1 of our podcast, but we've got a new addition. So that's really exciting. So thank you all. So I'm going to give you an introduction into today's guests. So we've got Matthew Baird, who's got a vast career in social housing recruitment. I think we met back, probably about 5-6 years ago now, Matt.
Yeah, it was around the time you were on the board for the CIH, so it was probably 2016 maybe 15, 14, I don't remember, but
yeah, I was up in Manchester at the CIH conference.
It absolutely was, and it's a fantastic event every year.
Absolutely. And so Matt took the massively brave step of starting his own housing recruitment business last year, which is super fantastic. And he also runs weekly social housing roundtable events, which I've been very privileged to attend. And they're just getting so much traction now from the sector because they're so informative, so much best practices shared. So that is fantastic. And I know there are a number of new ones planned. So when this comes out in May time, hopefully we'll have some more dates in the diary, Matt.
We absolutely will. I'm currently booked at the end of April, but yeah, May onwards is going to be exciting too. So yeah, very much looking forward to seeing what the rest of the year brings.
Fantastic. Now we've got Ernie. Ernie is an incredible public speaker. He currently has his own business, Ernie Said, which helps individuals turn up, stand up and speak up with confidence and share their stories. He has a great strapline, which I absolutely love, and it's how to sell through telling, not selling. And he's also an inspirational mentor and professional. Now, you might have to help me out here, Ernie. How do I say shiatsu? Is that right?
Shiatsu practitioner.
Absolutely, yeah. Absolutely fantastic. And he's got many other talents, which I'm sure we'll learn about today. And then on to our new guest, Renee. So actually, funnily enough, me and Renee met at one of Matt's roundtable events. So that just shows the power of networking. Renee has over 20 years of experience of working in the housing sector and also works a lot with private landlords. She works currently in learning and development at London Borough of Newham, but she's really exciting news for her is that she started her own business in February called RMY Specialist Housing Solutions. Is that right?
Yes, that's correct. Yeah, it's about advice, advocacy, training, provision for private landlords, tenants, and any housing providers out there.
Brilliant, super exciting. So we're recording this in February with you just about to launch. So I'm hoping when this comes out in May, you're starting to pick up a lot of traction around your business. So we wish you all the best of luck with that. So let's move on to today's topics for Housing Week. So the first one we're going to explore is, how do you see the sector, as in social housing, continue to innovate in the future? Renee, can I come to you first?
Yeah, sure. I think that, already organisations are starting to look at this and having things like the green agenda, biodiversity? How can they think differently and make green spaces and growing and that kind of thing, gardening, in more of a clever way? Because we do need more housing. We've always known that. That's always been a big issue and things like that for a long time. But I think also artificial intelligence is going to make a lot of things automated. So I think the innovations are going to come through for that, to free up officers out on the street where they can better target their customer service. I think if organisations kind of need to look differently at what they're doing, because if you keep doing the same thing, you're going to get the same results. So yeah, I think they're going to need to take a bigger role in development, what they have existingly, you know, building on top of buildings, perhaps. You know, I think, you know, there's going to be a lot of things that assist organisations, and we've already kind of seen that through the pandemic, and where things going a bit more digitally, and that jump, because when you looked in learning and development before, everyone was saying that, you know, things are going to go digital, but we've gone from what we thought would come in 10 years time to a 2-year quantum leap as such. So
You're
absolutely
right. You're absolutely right there. And I think the need, demand and supply of housing is always going to be there. But I think what actually the digital era is enabling us to do is to get back with building better relationships with our tenants and our residents, and providing those additional spaces for well-being, which is so topical at the moment. So I think you're completely right there, and we'll look a bit more about that when we come on to our next topic in a minute, Renee. Now, Ernie, what I wanted to ask you in terms of innovation is, from my perspective, there's a lot of apprenticeships that are going into the housing sector.
Yeah.
Now, I know you're an expert on speaking. So what sort of benefits do you think from an innovation point of view, do you think you could bring to helping those youngsters that are coming into the sector?
I think originally, if we'd have been having this conversation 2-3 years ago, I would have stressed the importance of workshops, working with mentors, going on to courses to learn about presentational speaking, and how to overcome the anxiety of actually standing up in front of an audience and facing that live audience, or even facing a board, a group of people to whom you were going to try and sell yourself. But obviously now we have this camera. And I originally thought, well, you know, that will make it easier for people to connect with their audience. But in my experience, people have often said, actually, I'm more nervous facing the camera than I am facing a live audience. Now, the techniques are the same. As you may know, Marie, I've got an event called the 4 Ps of perfect presentations. So you prepare your presentation, you practice it, you stand in front of people with the right posture, and then you perform. But now, because we're in front of camera, some of those, you still have to, in my opinion, you still have to prepare what you're going to say. You still have to practice what you're going to say. But because we're on camera, people have perhaps lost this thing about posture. And they don't feel as if they have to perform as much as they would have to in front of a live audience. And now we're going back to that. I think that's a skill that somehow we have got to get to them before they go in front of that live audience.
I'd agree with you there, Ernie. And the good thing is for the youngsters that are moving into the sector, they're very much growing up with the YouTube, the TikToks, and
Yeah.
actually that can present itself with a huge opportunity for
Yeah.
innovation for the housing sector in terms of, you know, using all of these different platforms with the confidence that these youngsters have to innovate. So I totally take your point, but it does require practice.
Yes. Yeah. If I could just quickly, Marie, I didn't think about this when I came on, but a few years ago, when I was facing my own challenges with rebuilding this business, I actually moved into a warden assisted, because I'm over 55, a warden assisted social housing complex. I won't mention the name of the group. There are certainly many positives, but there are negatives to it. And one of the negatives recently has been that because of COVID, the manager of the group has not been to our complex in nearly 2 years.
I totally take your point there, Ernie. And like Renee was saying earlier, and she alluded to, like AI and things, housing associations currently are doing a lot around exploring how they can get better engagement with people like yourself that are living in these schemes. So, for example, there's one that's really sort of forward thinking, and that's a business called Voicescape. And basically, they're being very innovative and using AI as a way to better engage with residents. So hopefully, Ernie, your experience will improve in time as that innovation does come to the market. So we'll wait and see. We'll wait and see. But I just want to move on to our next topic, if I can. Will communities and estates look the same in 2050? Matt, what's your view?
It's an interesting one. And I think actually when we're talking about innovation, I think sometimes what people forget is it's great to be innovative, don't get me wrong, but it's about being innovative around keeping the basics right. As Ernie's alluded to there, the key thing there for him is actually communication and being able to get a voice. So it's great being innovative about certain products and creating new things and being more digital. If at the end of the day, we're not actually troubleshooting the main issues with our tenants, the main issues that are going on the ground, then every single housing provider and every person I'm speaking to is having the same issues. And I hosted a roundtable that I know you were a part of, which was wonderful, with Hannah Harvey recently, where they believed that all the digital work they were doing at Saffron, all the work they've been doing was empowering, supporting and doing excellent work with their tenants. And then they've spent some time, some real time, going out and speaking with every single tenant group, every single tenant that was there to find out how their innovative practices were working. And they were getting it wrong. They were getting it wrong. And it took some hand-holding up. It took some real power and belief in what they wanted to change to be able to go, actually, you know what, we've got this wrong. Let's go and get it right. And now they are, and they're empowering the tenant voice. And their innovation has come from more tenant groups. They are utilizing the leader of the Facebook group, who was actually the leader of complaints, to come through and have a voice on the board. And it's things like this that are, as far as I'm concerned, are innovative, but equally it's innovation around getting the basics right. And this is where I think housing is going to go. I think what you will also see is going to go one of two ways, I guess, in my mind. You're either going to continue with this trend of having very, very large housing associations getting bigger and bigger and bigger, or we're going to see the reinforcing of the power of smaller housing associations and of community-led organisations. And personally, I hope it's the latter. Nothing against the large businesses, but we've seen the news. Certainly, obviously, we're still at the beginning of the year when recording this, recently going on with actually the state of disrepair of some very large housing providers in the state of their stock. And what you'll find when speaking to leaders, and I'm sure Renee will advocate for this, a lot of people who are leaders and doing very well in the housing sector are frustrated when they feel the businesses that perhaps they're a part of, they've built a community with, that are going out and they're merging with bigger and bigger organizations, they don't feel anymore like they have the power they once had at supporting their tenants. They feel they've lost their community focus. They've lost the reason why they got into housing in the first place. And to me, it's going to go one of two ways. I really hope it's the latter. I'm wary of it being the former. I think a lot of it will come from change or lack of change within government and policy and what happens with the funding provided. But there's a huge need for housing to become more inclusive, to get more people involved in social housing who live in housing into the sector, for the sector itself to become better known actually what it delivers, because as the phrase across housing is, I fell into it as a sector. People don't understand what housing delivers. And if we're not doing that, we're not getting enough young people into housing from the diverse backgrounds beyond race and gender and sex and everything else. We're talking disability, mental and physical. We're talking people of the gypsy traveller community. All of these people need to have a voice at the table. And if they don't know actually how broad housing is, it's going to fall behind. So I'm hoping, and I really hope, and it's some of the change that I know myself in the roundtables and the community safety podcast, your voice are trying to implement is actual change, is that by moving forward, what housing is going to look like in 2050, I hope, is if we can go back to this community-led feel for what a business is all about, is we're going to have more inclusivity, we're going to have better diversity, we can have more of a tenant voice that's more powerful than it is now, and we're going to be able to make change within the communities that we live in, because that is the whole point in housing, and it should have the stress on it that housing is actually the most important. If you can get people living in a safe, comfortable environment, other things will follow and life will improve and poverty will reduce. We have to get this right.
Oh, I think that's brilliant. We want Matt for mayor. That was brilliant, Matt. Absolutely brilliant. And I totally agree. Renee, what's your view?
So I think picking up from what Matt has said about, get the frustrations at the moment, and I think we're quite thankful that the government is sort of like making change there about being more led by the tenants and the voice of the tenants, because I think in very large organisations that does get lost. So, it's not only the tenants' frustration, it's the staffing frustration as well that kind of gets lost. But now there is the start of change, whereas myself in roles that I've been involved in is looking at new ways of how can we encourage that, because some of these communities have not had that for a long time, especially within sort of councils sort of way that they've done things, whereas housing associations, I guess they have sort of like done some of this and are a step ahead on the government legislation and changes. But I hope that we don't lose that level of the artificial intelligence frees up staff on the ground so that they can do that hand holding, they can do that support. Visually, I don't think we're going to see things as they are now. I mean, I walked past a billboard the other day which looked at what the city of the future was going to look like, and it's completely different to what we would see now. That buildings are going to be higher because it's more units, that it'd be more connected. You'll have monorails, you'll have charging points
flying
here
cars,
and there.
probably.
It's all going to be completely mobile.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I was speaking to a lady called Lisa Richards. She's an urban designer, and she's working on a project in Enfield in London at the moment, and they're looking at podium developments whereby they're putting more retail and shops, sort of eateries, all of those things, and then they're having additional levels for green space, for example. So I think it's very interesting how things will develop, but the fundamental thing that we need to get right is speaking to our tenants. Now, Ernie, I'm just going to ask you this as well, because obviously if you're living in a scheme at the moment, what's your view? Does that sort of environment work for you?
Well, I was going to say, when we look at films, fiction, and I go back to the films of maybe the 80s and 90s, these films where they predicted the future, most of them were of the apocalyptical kind, most of the films. But within those films, you recognised, but there were rarely parks involved. Suddenly, everything had come into a conglomerate. And when I moved in here, it was a smaller group. And the tenants tended to stay. You know, we had tenants for a long time. But then a bigger group came in, and I may be controversial here, but instead of when an apartment became free, they waited and they vetted people to come in. This bigger group went straight to groups like Mencap. And they said, when an apartment comes free, we will have one of your people in here, which some people might agree is the right thing. But what's happened is you have people here now paying a reasonably high payment per month for an apartment next to someone who screams, comes out into the corridor and screams at midnight and 1 o'clock. And people who swear at you as you go down the corridor.
Well, Ernie, in terms of those sorts of things, I mean, it's all around people's vulnerability and the allocations policies of those housing associations. I take your point. But in those circumstances, I'd suggest you're probably best to speak to your housing officer, which I'm sure you'll have an allocated housing officer. But
although by the sound of it, that's part of the problem, isn't it? Is you're not getting those people on the ground, and we're not having the conversations. And it's
yeah.
But to be honest, yeah, the person you speak to is now employed by the bigger. As Matt was saying, if we'd have been smaller, I think there'd have been another solution.
Yeah.
More smaller.
More consultation would have at least happened with the residents first.
Yeah, that sounds absolutely true. That sounds true. Okay, so thank you guys. Thanks for that. Now let's move on to our third topic. So attracting the best talent in the sector. What do we need to do? Matt, I'm coming to you because you are our recruitment housing expert.
I actually was down with a business in Hampshire yesterday, presented to their board exactly on this. And a lot of theirs was about recruiting trustees. It was recruiting succession planning for executive teams. But it's the same message right through. And if you work in housing, the most important thing right now, and evidently nothing's going to change too much in the next few months, but we're going through something called the Great Resignation at the moment. People are leaving jobs in droves. People are setting up their own consultancies because they've been frustrated with the way big businesses are working. And Renee is, I'm one of them, Renee is one, Marie, you're one, and Ernie, you've set up your own business. This is happening more and more because it is empowering to do so. But the problem we're having within that is that brands are still needing to attract talent, and more so than ever, when you look at particularly, say, let's take the larger housing associations, they are desperate for housing officers at the moment. There has never been a bigger need in the country at the moment for support workers. Trying to recruit support workers is very difficult. And a lot of places are saying, oh, well, we only want experienced people. Well, then the pay isn't right in order to attract the talent. Or they are retraining, and that is working much, much better. But then the problem you're finding is that the salaries in those sectors just aren't high enough. And the big issue, I mean, over the last 12 months, something came out the other day that said that the average salary has gone up by 4.3% over the last year, which is a huge growth on tax, etc. However, inflation is 5.1%. So actually, if you're in a senior position, you're looking for an 8 or 9% increase for actually to be viable for you to be earning more than you were a year ago. And this will continue to go on. So the most important thing, and businesses, particularly in housing associations, need to start doing now, and some are very, very good at it, others are behind the curve, is to, and this will sound strange, but to stop being so humble, is to start really championing what we're good at as a sector and what the sector does so well, but getting that stuff onto your social media platforms, but in particular LinkedIn. Facebook is important for connecting with your residents. You need to be showing them and giving them the voice, because that's where your residents will tend to engage with you. Some on Twitter, some on Instagram, some on TikTok and others. If you are trying to attract talent, if you're trying to keep talent coming into your company, LinkedIn is absolutely everything right now, because that's where the majority of housing professionals are moving to. I run training courses on it and I'm developing that stuff all the time. And the important thing with that is making sure businesses are showing what they're doing for their residents, even if that's all their continuous narrative is through, is what they're doing for their residents and what they're doing to empower the residents' voice. People aren't just kind of going, you know, I could reach out to say, Renee, oh, I've got a vacancy, are you interested? I am probably the 5th person to do that in the last 2 weeks. There are lots of opportunities coming out. People trying to secure talent has never been greater. So as much as I will sell your business and I will empower you and I will consult with you and I will tell you what's going on in the market, I will explain why salaries are higher, why maybe you need to look at bringing somebody through or increasing your salary, all of that stuff. I can do everything alongside with you, but if your brand isn't there, if you aren't showing what your business is doing day to day, then unfortunately, they'll take a look on your website, they'll take a look on your social media, and they go, actually, I'm going to go for this other opportunity first to see how I get on, and then I might come back to that. But by the time they come back, they've had 3 other opportunities. Yeah. So it's about doing what you can to really, really stand out. It's about listening to the sector as a whole. There's an incredible post which came out a couple of days ago, which is about a guy who said recruitment agencies are basically redundant. You don't need them. I was like, absolutely fine, because everyone's struggling for talent, and yet I've set up a business. So I'd love to hear. But the idea behind that was it's because it's about value added. It's about understanding, actually, don't get me wrong, if I'm just going to put an advert out for you and then send you some CVs and charge you thousands of pounds, then yeah, by all means, go and use someone else. It's about consulting and listening. It's about understanding what is going on in the market that you're in, and understanding that actually, if I'm speaking to 1,000 other people at the moment, as I'm doing every week, every month, and talking and saying, look, if this role isn't a 10% increase on what they're on at the moment, we're not going to get them through the door. Or so we need to recruit someone at a more junior rate, or we need to increase the salary. Or the role might be excellent, but if you want someone in 3 days a week, then actually they are going to add £5,000 to their fee, to their salary, because they've been working from home for the last 2 years.
Yeah.
So it is something they're not used to having to pay anymore. So therefore they are going to make a loss. And there's lots of other things that go into it. So your brand, number one, your brand is absolutely everything. And number 2, market research and understanding what it is you actually need. I say the final point, very, very swiftly, will be understanding where your gaps are in your trustees, in your boards, and in your teams. If you haven't got somebody who's an expert on social media or digital, get someone in, and we revert back to, even if it's an apprentice, there are some phenomenal young people with digital tech skills at the moment. Get them in, because they know what they're doing and they can have ideas. And even if it's just producing ideas, this innovation, these ideas are everything at the minute. And it's what people who want to join your business will want to see.
I totally agree. I'm very acutely aware of the time, guys. I'm sorry I haven't had chance to go into more detail, and we could have gone on and on here. It's been fantastic to have you all on today. Thank you so much for joining us. If you want to get in touch with either Matt, Renee or Ernie, have a look in our show notes. Their details of how to contact them will be there. But thank you all very much for joining me today. It's been incredible. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
So
Thanks,
much.
Mike. Take care.
Thank you.